Okay, good evening, Westford. I'm calling to order the December 2nd meeting of the Westford Park and Recreation Commission. My name's Chris Barrett. I'm the current chair of the commission. This evening, we have a pretty full agenda, and if any resident or commissioner would like to ask a question, raise a comment, I ask that you use the raise hand feature in the Zoom session. You can also use the ask a question under the Q&A icon there, and we'll get to you. But please, let's everybody use the raise hand feature just to try and keep things organized. And with that, our first item on the agenda is our open forum. So we have a few minutes allocated for any resident or to address the commission on any items that is not on the agenda for this evening. I don't see anybody raising their hand for that. And we have Ken here. Okay. Going to give it a few minutes just to allow others to join before we start our 7:05 agenda item, which is a discussion regarding the replacement of the turf fields at the Nutting Road Community Fields location. As part of that discussion this evening, we have a few speakers that I'm going to start off with. One of whom is Ken, who is a former Park and Rec Commissioner, and he was part of the group that was instrumental in bringing the community fields into reality, and also helping with getting the artificial turf installed at the academy. Then we have Russ, who is a representative from A-Turf. A-Turf is the company that has provided us with a quote that we've used as part of the capital planning process. And we also have John, who is a Westford resident, a civil engineer, and a athletic facility designer. He also happens to be the chair of the ASTM FO8, which is a group that does the development of standards, safety standards for sports equipment, playing services, and facilities. So he's going to talk a little bit about how those standards have been developed and how those standards have been applied to artificial turf fields. All right. We'll give it one more minute and then we'll let Ken get going and we'll go from there. I assume Ken can speak at this point. Can I unmute him? Ken,
Hello,
can you?
Chris. Yeah, hello,
Yeah.
Chris.
Hi, Ken. Great. Just give us 1 minute, Ken, before just so we're a little closer to the start of our agenda, and then we'll let you get going.
All
And
right.
thank you so much for being willing to join us. Remind me again, Ken, when was your tenure with the Park and Rec Commission?
I was in the early like 2010 around there with Pat Savage and other people. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah, going back a ways.
yeah.
I will also point out that we have, as staff here this evening, Kyle Fox, who is our Director of Public Works. We have Michelle Collette, who is our Recreation Director. Mark Warren here is the head of our Water Department. And I believe, do we also have on our Health Director, Kyle? Is Ray here?
She is. Yep.
Okay, and Ray Dix, who is our health director, and the chair of the Board of Health is also present, just so that everybody knows who everybody is. I think we're close enough, Ken. So why don't you go ahead, give us that background, if you will, on the project and how we came to have these nice resources that the town's enjoyed for the past decade or more.
All right. Thank you, Chris. So yeah, we started fundraising around 2008, and basically a group of people in the town came together, Westford Academy, people associated with Westford Youth Soccer, people associated with Westford Youth Lacrosse, and said, how can we get artificial turf fields into Westford? It was a little bit daunted at the start, and we formed a committee. We started fundraising. We took our first contribution, I think, around 2008. It was 3 fields, as you know, 1 at WA, 2 at community fields on Nutting Road. We were very fortunate that the Community Preservation Act contributed $1.2 million towards the fields at Nutting Road. The total cost of those fields was roughly 1.6 million. The cost of the field at WA roughly 800,000. So the total project cost was around 2.4 million, roughly 800,000 each, just to keep it simple math. So we could only use the Community Preservation Act funds at the community fields at Nutting Road. So that covered, a lot of the costs there. The rest of the money, the other 400,000 or so, came from youth sports and fundraising. WA, obviously, they leveraged their alumni, the WA trustees. Jeff Hall, predecessor to Jim Arcero, was very helpful. And we did a lot of, traditional stuff, spaghetti suppers, raffles, all the usual stuff. We put in a brick park, which we got finished, I think, around 2015. The fields went into use around 2013. And really was a community-wide effort. And at times it was tough to keep the coalition together because, money would come in and one entity would say, well, let's just go with our entity. But we wanted to keep it together because when we got to the construction, we could then leverage a lot of those costs across the 2 sites. Things like the engineering assessment at the start, the actual construction, the paving, and then we both put in commemorative items. We put the flagpole and the brick park at Nutting, and then we also did a plaque, a stone plaque over at WA, both of which reflected donors to the project, not, one plaque for WA showing donors there. So very much kept it together, kept it a unified effort. We always knew that the fields would last about 10 years, so it's not too much of a surprise. I know the Recreation Department has done a very good job maintaining them and grooming them and all that stuff, but with the wear and tear, they do eventually need replacement. So I'll just stop right there, Chris, and see if you or anybody else has questions.
Sure, thanks, Ken. Commissioners, any questions from you? And any questions from attendees? If you have any, please feel free to raise your hand. All right, I'm not seeing any. All right. Ken, thank you so much for that brief history. Appreciate your attendance this evening and again, all the work that you did long ago to get us to where we are today. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Russ, I think you're with us. You're up next. So Russ is from A-Turf. Go ahead. I think you should be able to. There we are. All right, perfect. Hey, Russ.
Hey, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Likewise.
I appreciate being invited and having the opportunity to speak with everyone. And I'd love to answer any questions as they come up. So feel free to, jump in if I say anything or you have any questions as I go here. So just a little background on myself. Been with A-Turf now 10 years. Actually got my start on an installation crew. So, I know there are a lot of concerns in the community and it comes up a lot, but personally worked on fields myself. I have no concern with the safety of the material that we work with. We have statements from all of our suppliers and we get them renewed each year. They go for PFAS testing, lead. There's a ASTM standard testing called EN-71, which is actually the European Children's Testing Toy Safety Standard. The reason why we use the European standard is actually it's higher than the American standard. So we pass all of the safety testing in the industry, and we're actually far below that. So we have multiple different systems that we could get into, of course. Just the proposal that I sent you is kind of our standard. It's a very high quality system that's going to get you that 10, 15 years, no problem. When you do a project of this size, you need it to last. So we gave you a system that we know is going to be very good, and it's gonna perform what you're used to. We have alternate infills. I know I discussed this with Kyle. There's in the industry, the standard, the norm would be recycled car tires. It's a great reuse of, recycled car tires versus them just going right to landfills. So that material is ground up, cleaned, processed, and then added to the fields as a cushion layer. And that's also accompanied by sand infill, basically beach sand. And that all goes to the same EN 71 testing, PFAS testing, all of that. None of the components, there is no PFAS in these components, if that is a main concern of the community. Of course, as you do your research, you'll realize that there's contamination, cross-contamination everywhere, because PFAS are in everything. It's in makeup, your cookware, in your house. If you were to have numerous items in your house tested, they're made with PFAS, but nothing actually in turf systems are made with PFAS. You will find trace elements from cross-contamination, but from our suppliers, we have statements stating that nothing is made with those chemicals. We do have alternate infill options. So the next best infill option, if the SBR recycled car tires was a big concern, we have EPDM, which is basically the same rubber that is in all of the gaskets in your drinking fountains. And, if you have a problem with EPDM rubber, then you basically have to go through and replace every drinking fountain, because that's the rubber that's using those to seal the gaskets. We also have a coated sand, which is called EnviroFill, another good option, but that option requires having a shock pad. So the shock pad basically guarantees when an athlete hits the surface, it's going to spread the load laterally, and it will prevent concussions. You'll see pretty much all in the NFL, pretty much every field is installed over a shock pad. They've done the research. They know that it spreads the load and how much safety it adds to adding that to your system. It adds about approximately $1.35 or so per square foot, but you also get multiple life cycles. So have fields that are 15 years old being replaced. The pad stays, it's on its, second, third life cycle. So you're going to get 30 or more years out of a shock pad if you were to consider that investment. Artificial turf. So one thing people really don't even necessarily know or realize, but there is really not much testing that goes into a natural grass field. Like I mentioned, a GMAX test, which measures an athlete hitting the surface and how that spreads the load. If a field were to be over 200, which is the industry's maximum, the field would be condemned. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with a football or soccer field in the middle of August when it hasn't rained in a while. It's hard as a rock. Nobody's going to step in and say you can't play on a natural grass field because it's natural. So the safety standards are actually a little bit higher on artificial turf. Most people don't realize that. And along with all the different tests that goes through to be able to even install a turf field, there's a lot of testing for chemicals and the N-71 test. So the safety is there. I know that was a main concern tonight, and I just want to kind of alleviate, anybody's concern that we're just putting in fields and, not knowing what's in there. Because of course, in our community, friends, neighbors, I personally worked on fields. We do want to make sure that we have safe fields for kids, adults, anybody who's out there playing on them. We want to make sure it's safe for everyone.
Great. Thank you, Russ. Question from Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Russ, I just wanted one clarification. The shock pad you're talking about, is that the one you quoted us for the 200,000?
I believe
As-
so.
As extending the life of the turf?
Yes, then yes, that would be correct. Yep.
So for the commissioners, I wanted to clarify, because that's part of the $1.5 million cost. The original estimate was 1.3. The pad was 200,000. and it promised additional life to the turf. So that shock pad is included in the price you've seen.
Correct,
Can you-
yes. The point that you make there, so standard just across the board, every turf that gets installed comes with an 8-year warranty on a full-size athletic field. But we're so confident in our system over the shock pad, we actually offer the longest warranty in the industry of 12 years. So that's the language on the quote that I provided you. That's the 12-year warranty.
Great. Russ, can you talk a little bit about disposal of the existing field? Is that part of the quote that you provided, and how is that handled?
Yeah, so we work with a removal company. He actually will fully cut up the field, take it back to his facility. Then he has a system that he puts it through. He separates and cleans the sand and rubber. It is rebagged and then reused on the next, not your specific field, because that's a process for it to be cleaned, separated, and rebagged. But then that could be reused multiple life cycles as well. So that doesn't just go right back into a landfill. And then the industry is working towards this right now, but they're actually using the fiber and they're melting it down and actually making recycled lumber out of the fibers.
Great, thank you. Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, could you go back and talk about the different fill that you can use if you use the shock pad?
Yeah, so you could have any infill with shock pad. So I just want to clarify that it's not a specific, if you were to use a shock pad, you don't have to use a specific infill, but there is an EnviroFill, which is a coated sand, and it's a rounded sand. But because EnviroFill is so expensive, you would go with a shorter pile height. So typical, what was quoted originally was a 2¼ length fiber. If you were to go with EnviroFill, because you have to fill that fiber up, and that's what protects it is the infill. If you were to use EnviroFill, we would shorten the length of the fiber to about 1.5 inches. And because it's much shorter and the infill is very expensive, we would put that over a shock pad, and that guarantees when you hit that surface that it's going to be nice and safe and provide a good cushion.
Is that what's in the quote currently?
Not EnviroFill. So you have SBR, which is recycled car tires. Like I said, that's the standard that's used on every field, unless there is an issue. Every other infill, doesn't matter if it was us or another company, anything other than SBR is more expensive. So
What's
you're going to
the-
add. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
but what's the difference? What's the delta between
So
Enviro-
I did a little bit of math beforehand. So EPDM is your next best option. Like I said, it plays the closest to the SBR rubber. And that's what's in, your gaskets for all your drinking fountains and everything like that. So you're going to add about $175,000 approximately, because it's a 200,000 square foot field. And just so everyone's aware, 3 pounds rubber, 3 pounds sand goes into a field. So you're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds of sand and rubber. So if you were to go with a different infill, it could jump up that cost considerably.
Okay.
Thanks.
And so, Russ, do you have the next level up? Do you have that worked out?
Yeah. So then EnviroFill, you're going to be up over $300,000 more.
Okay, thank you.
That's the shorter one, but that is just the additional cost of the sand. You would then have to have a shock pad. So that 200,000 factored in for there also would then come into play.
Great. Okay, thank you. Jackie, you're up.
Yes. What is the shock pad made out of?
There's a good question. There's multiple different shock pads. So they have a foam shock pad that's made by there's a company called Brock who has a specific foam style pad. There's another company called, drawing a blank now, of course, but I'll come back to that one. And then there's a rubber pad, which is our parent company, actually, it's called Ecor. So the weight room flooring that you'd see in basically every high school athletic gym, our parent company makes that, and they make the exact same pad that goes underneath. The only difference is it's porous, so it allows for the rainwater to drain through. And that pad is made with rubber. The other 2 pads are like a foam pad.
So
The
they
other
sound.
pad is Pro Play. Sorry, I just
Oh, that's okay. So those materials are they better than the rubber that they're replacing? Are they better for the people playing on the field because maybe they're not as exposed to it, but is the material really any better? It's underneath something else, so it's like shielding the people playing, but it could still be it could be same composition as the tires.
Oh, well, yeah. So everything passes our, like I said, from every supplier, we have PFAS statements. So it's not like one component we're going to sneak in that's like, we gotcha. Anything that's going into this turf system, we would have backup information saying, hey, this has been tested for PFAS. It's safe to use. So the rubber pad comes from our parent company that would go underneath it. There would be no direct contact with an athlete, of course, with any of the pads.
I'm not worried about that. I'm just wondering if the tire material, is it negating using Enviro sand if you're still putting a layer of rubber that might be equitable to the tires that we're trying to substitute? It sounds like the foam or the rubber, it sounds very similar to the tires. Is it worth replacing the tires with something what's the difference? Why replace that with more rubber? What's the difference in those rubber materials that makes one safer than the other?
Oh, they're just different. It's different companies. So there's not like one company has a rubber pad, one company has a foam pad, one has a different style foam pad.
What makes that safer than the tires?
Well, the safety aspect comes from GMAX, and the tires being safe to begin with is because it passes all of the child testing toys. So basically, when they test toys that kids could stick in their mouth or play with or anything like that, our material passes the strictest test for children's toys. So I know that just generally, everyone, this isn't the first time, we hear this quite often actually. So recycled car tires is definitely a big concern. It's been tested. I've worked on it for years. I'm around it every single day. I'm not concerned. I certainly wouldn't be putting myself at risk if I thought there was a concern. There's recycled car tires in the current field that's out there right now. I offered the possibility for alternate infills. So, in case it was a community issue, I don't see any issue whatsoever using SBR rubber. And also one analogy I do like to just point out. So everyone has cars, we all are familiar with that. You get your cars, let's say they weigh 35 pounds a piece. You drive on them for 3 to 5 years, they break down, and then you need new tires. Well, where is that rubber? It's on your roads, it's on your sidewalk, it is everywhere already. And of course, we're testing water, we're testing your soils and everything. So that rubber is in our environment everywhere. The only way to eliminate that is to completely make tires from something else. So the industry created, an alternate great opportunity to grind this up and use it as a cushion. But that rubber is everywhere in the environment already, and it's deemed safe already. The only difference now is we're playing on it, as a cushion, but it's everywhere you are in your everyday life. It's everywhere that you're going to come in contact with it every day of your life.
Okay, thank you. So I do have one more question, but I still feel like before a decision's made on the tires versus the Enviro sand and shock pad, having a better understanding of the difference in the shock pad, rubber or foam, and the tires, because I would just want to know if the EnviroFoam option with the rubber or foam, is it safer composition than the tires? And I don't think there's an answer tonight, but that's a question I have. The other question I have.
Not to cut you off, I just
Sure.
want to kind of put an end or maybe clarify that in a sense, but you're kind of almost asking me if it's safer. It's safe in my opinion, and with the testing that's already provided, it's already safe. So I don't know what would make it safer or less safe. Like I said, it's underneath the turf. You're already playing on SBR rubber that's deemed safe with all of the ASTM and EN71 tests that are out there in the industry. So everything already says that it's safe. So I don't know what would then make it unsafe, and especially if it was underneath the turf. So
So it's underneath the turf, and I think that gets to the next question I have. So the nutting road where this turf is going is close to our nutting road well in Westford, which has shown each month to have a higher PFAS rating than our other wells in town. And so I do not know. We would need to defer to experts to know if water running through and off the turf has potential to impact our water sources. And so that's an unknown. Is it currently? Could it in the future? That's a question I would want to know the answer to. And, and I think about the material. In the summer, it's really hot. I feel like that's a different testing condition. Do chemicals leach more? If it is getting into the water, would it leach more under different conditions like heat? And then PFAS, a chemical that is cumulative, if it's getting into the water source and it's continuous as the turf field, we're putting, like you said, the PFAS is everywhere, it's in tires, but we're putting it into an environment that is close to a water source. So it would be great to do our due diligence and know, could there be any impact to our water source? I'd want to know that in advance. And if there is any current impact, it would be good to know. And I did pose the question to our town manager about Chapter 171 wetlands from the Westford bylaws, just to understand if this project should be evaluated for the zoning in relation to wetlands and water sources in town. And so that's an outstanding question right now that she's looking into for us. But when I think about the testing, I'm sure that testing is done in a more controlled environment of the material, and it is safe, like you said, safe for children to touch, play on, but this could have impact beyond the athlete users of the field. It could have impact to people in their homes, like myself, many miles away, getting water through my tap.
Okay,
So
Jackie,
I think would be good to look
hang on a
into.
second. I
Sure.
think maybe it might be helpful for you to hear from the director of our water department.
Sure.
He can talk a little bit about the PFAS contamination in the community and what the community is doing to deal with that. Would that be helpful? Would that answer maybe some of your questions?
Definitely. I would love to hear from him. But I would also like to know that this material, I'd like to know the tests on it, right? Before,
Yeah.
and how that could impact water, and how close should it go to a water supply, right? Like how close should it go where runoff could impact water? Because I think the field should happen, but maybe if there is impact, we consider a location, right, at a greater distance.
Yeah, there is no location.
Can I
in the
just say
greater
one
region.
thing
Yeah.
to clarify, Chris? Sorry.
Go right ahead. Yep.
So there isn't PFAS in the chemical makeup of tires. There is contamination in, everything, but it's not actually in the chemical makeup. So just from it being out there, it's going to have cross contamination. You could walk across the parking lot and pick it up and put it out there. But any of the PFAS that have been found on artificial turf fields is cross contamination because it's not in any of the chemical makeup of the components of the field. So just that clarification, I just want to point out there.
Could the field test for free of PFAS, but then if it's heated up to like a very high degree, show positive? I mean, could it just...
Not in the chemical makeup. It's not made with PFAS. So no.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, it's a question for Russ, and I'm not sure you can answer this, but I'm curious. Would it be safe to assume, or maybe I'm not sure safe to assume is the answer, got the question, that anything new in a turf field would be probably better than in terms of environmental impact than what we have right now that was put down in 2012 or 13?
So I would say the concern for PFAS is certainly relatively newer. Over the last couple of years, we've been hearing about this. So I can't speak to what was installed previously because we didn't install that. So I don't know, I don't know that it was ever of the chemical makeup in tires, but I know that it's not currently. So, you know, if it's whatever goes in there now will be tested. And that should give you, you know, peace about it. But, you know, we didn't install the current field. I don't believe that it is. You know, like I said, if you were to test your cell phone, your jeans, you know, you could have come in contact with PFAS. It's in makeup, you know, it's in your cookware. So it's everywhere. So it's very easy to have it on you and cross contaminate. So if you were to test your field and you were to find it, I wouldn't be surprised, but I don't believe that it was originally in the chemical makeup, and it's certainly not now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. So, Mark, Warren, could you just speak briefly about the PFAS situation in Westford, and then, you know, perhaps brief the public here on efforts to remediate the PFAS contamination that we're currently dealing with?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, sir.
So no problem. Kyle, would you actually have that map available to pull up real quick? A visual might help to show folks our current situation with PFAS. Beautiful. All right, thanks, Kyle. So this slide essentially shows our testing results from our 9 groundwater sources throughout the town. And might
Can
be a little
Can
difficult
it
to
be
see
made
here, but
a little bit larger?
yeah,
Is that possible?
I think he's working on it.
yeah,
I see the mouse moving around.
yeah. Well, I can still go ahead and explain it if that helps.
Why don't you go ahead
Technical
and start? I'm sure
difficulties.
Kyle will put it back up once it's got it in full screen
All right,
mode.
no problem. So long story short, we have 9 groundwater sources in town, groundwater wells and well fields. Really, the well that's been impacted the most from PFAS is our Country Road well, and that's actually down near the Old Country Road, Forge Village Road area, near the Westford Academy. We do have 4 wells that are up closer to the Nutting Road Fields location. Those would be our Cody, Stupinski, Depot Road, and Nutting Road wells. Those wells all currently show PFAS concentrations below the current Massachusetts standard of 20 parts per trillion. Nutting Road ranges from 12.3 to 6.5 parts per trillion. Depot Road well, which is actually the closest well to the Nutting Road fields, and probably the most hydrogeologically connected because they're both along Kai's Brook, ranges from 12.8 to 14.7 parts per trillion. And as I explained earlier, the current Massachusetts standard is 20 parts per trillion. So they're below the Mass standard, but as you probably all are aware, the EPA recently instituted lower standards down at 4 parts per trillion. So those numbers are, you know, they're not high, but they're significant. But the thing this map shows really is that we have PFAS concentrations in all of our groundwater wells. It's really everywhere. Like the previous speaker said, it's everywhere. So we do see it in all of our wells. But the Depot Road well, it's again, it's between 12.8 and 14.7 parts per trillion. And that's actually the total of 6 PFAS compounds. I guess the question is, does the Nutting Road fields artificial turf affect that well? And I guess the simple answer is it's virtually impossible to say because these levels in the Depot Road well really are similar to other wells throughout town that are most likely not connected to the Nutting Road fields. And the way I look at it, it's a little bit of a catch-22. Do you put in artificial turf, and is there a risk of PFAS? I really haven't been able to find any sort of smoking guns that link artificial turf fields with PFAS groundwater contamination. I do know it's a concern, absolutely. But if you put in a natural turf field, then you have to water it more. You have to use fertilizer, pesticides, herbicides, etc. So I guess it's sort of a balance of risks. But to summarize, um, it we've had 10 years of essentially experience with the artificial turf field at Nutting Road, and from these concentrations, it's really impossible to say whether it's had any impact on the Depot Road well at all. And as you can see, those concentrations are quite similar to concentrations in many of our wells throughout town.
You're on mute, Chris.
Chris, you're
Chris,
muted.
you're
Chris,
muted.
you're on-
Sorry, I just, Mark, I just wanted to see if you could talk just a minute or two about what the town's efforts are regarding the PFAS remediation efforts for our well water.
Thank you. I knew I forgot something major. So great point, Chris. We are currently in the engineering planning stages for constructing 2 PFAS treatment plants in town, one at our Nutting Road facility and one at our Forge Road facility. So all of the water from our wells will in fact be treated for PFAS in about 2 years.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark.
Sure.
I think, Jackie, you have a question?
Yes, Mark, thank you so much. I guess 2 quick things. One would be, you mentioned kind of catch-22 with the turf, the synthetic turf versus natural grass also has some implications if there are pesticides or fertilizer. Wouldn't it
Sure.
be best to not put these things, not put fields that could have either near water supply? If either of those things can impact water, shouldn't they be a certain distance from a water supply or runoff to avoid the potential contamination? And if we're now realizing that these things are impacting that, then can't that be an extra step in the process? Because otherwise we're possibly knowingly adding contamination. But if we can test it and look into what's a safe distance, if any, wouldn't that be
Jackie,
helpful?
I appreciate the question, but I'm going to tell you right now, the discussion isn't about moving the turf fields to another location in town. There is literally no other location that we can establish fields right
Okay,
now.
but Chris, if we're contaminating our water supply, if we can, and we know, then there shouldn't be a field at all, right? You can't sacrifice your town drinking water or water in general for the sake of a playing field. Then everyone's impacted, right? So we need to consider,
Yeah, but I
is
think
there
what
any
you, so
contamination?
Jackie, but you just heard from a number of people that are familiar with our water supply that it is impossible for anyone to determine that the contamination that we're currently dealing with is from this one particular location.
It's
So
not
Chris,
impossible
sorry,
to know
sorry.
that it is not impossible to know if there is contamination happening because we can test. So that is not impossible. And I
Okay,
do not think that it
let's
is something that we should skip. I
let's
think
let-
that we should look into that.
Let's let Mark answer your question, okay?
Okay.
Sure. Thank you. So yeah, well, again, a couple things. To do a real study, I think, on that field, it would be a pretty extensive project. Would have to install monitoring wells, do a lot of testing. So we're talking tens of thousands, if not more, for money. Just to let you know that. I just want to make sure you understand that it's not insignificant. But I did also just want to maybe clarify myself or make sure that you understand that really I think there are so many sources of PFAS, and if you think about it, the entire town's on septic, and each septic system is a source of PFAS. So based on that, I'm not saying I don't how do I word this? I'm trying to say that there's really no evidence that I can see that the Nutting Road field is causing any contamination. I can't say that it's not, but I, based on these concentrations in this map, I can't say that it is either. I I think there are just so many sources in town. It's impossible to pinpoint anything.
So that one particular field or one particular well is closer to the synthetic turf field and it has higher numbers than others. What do you have any theories on what is causing that well to have higher numbers than others?
It doesn't though. I mean, the Stupitsky well, which is
But we're not
I guess
using that,
south.
right?
Well,
Are we using that
no,
well?
we're using all these wells.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, sorry. So we're using
For
all of these
drinking
9
water?
sources. Yes. And the Depot Row well, really the concentrations compared to the other wells, it's in many cases it's roughly the same. Like the Cody well is 13 parts per trillion.
When
The
I looked
Stupitsky
at
wells,
oh, sorry, Mark. Sorry, didn't mean to
no, it's okay.
interrupt you.
That's all right. Yeah, but the Depot Row well doesn't stand out as being really that high, especially compared to the concentrations in the other wells. That's what I was, sorry, that's kind of what I was trying to say.
Thank you. And then one other, we had, I
Jackie,
had been in,
Jackie,
oh, sorry, Chris.
just 1 second. I just want to, you've asked a ton of questions. I just want to see if Mike has had his hand up. Mike, do you?
Oh,
do you
I'm
still
sorry,
have a
Mike.
question?
Well, you have 2 things. Well, different question. For the benefit of all the commissioners and the the other attendees, for those that are opposed to, are not necessarily opposed or have a question about going forward with this, can you briefly let everybody know what the process is if we would have, as a commission, approve moving forward with the field ahead? What other opportunities would people against it have to voice their opinion, like a town meeting or any other commissions? Could you just kind of give an overview of how this would proceed if we were to approve it?
Sure, I can talk to that. And I probably should have started with this just for the folks who are on the call and maybe never had heard about this project or knew how it would proceed. So thank you for the question. And Jackie, we will come back to your questions as well. So right now, what the commission has done they've over the past year looked at a number of different projects that the town needs to do with regards to keeping up the recreational amenities in the community. And because there's many of those requests, the commission needs to prioritize those and bring those forward for funding. So the commission did prioritize this particular project as number 1 on their list, and it was brought to our capital planning committee. Our capital planning committee starts to meet in the fall every year, and it goes through the list of all the capital requests that have come out from all the different departments and other boards and commissions. So from the fire department, police department, schools, engineering. They look at all these projects and the capital planning committee makes a recommendation to the town manager about which projects should be move forward for funding. And then it's up to the finance director and the town manager to figure out if we can fund those projects. That funding can come from a number of different sources, right? So in some cases, it might go to community preservation. And if it did go to the community preservation group, that committee would then weigh in on whether or not the project met certain criteria for funding, and it would balance that request against all the other requests that had come in for that funding cycle for CPA funds. And if that committee felt that there was enough funds and that project weren't moving forward, the project would move forward to town meeting. And if it stayed with capital planning and we have the budget for it, it would also move forward to town meeting. And ultimately at town meeting, that's when the taxpayers would be able to render their vote to fund this particular project. And then at that point, if the funding was approved, we would go through an RFP process to solicit, bids to work on this project. Does that answer your question, Mike?
Yeah, it does answer my question. So people obviously could speak for or against it at town meeting in terms of swaying the town meeting to approve it or not approve it. I also just want to mention for everybody's benefit, I'm also a member of the CPC. That money as of 2012 cannot be used, but per state law, to fund a turf replacement. So just because there were a couple of questions in the question and answer area about the CPC money that cannot be used for this project.
Okay. And is that all your questions, Mike?
So my question is right now, I as a
Okay.
member of the commission, I think we've done due diligence in hearing from a lot of different people on this subject, and I would like to make a motion to take a vote on whether the commission to approve this project or not.
We could do that. Is there a second from the commission on that motion at this time?
Could I ask another quick question?
Just one second, Jackie, just because we have this motion. Was there a second? Matt, did you say something?
Thinking about it. Yeah, I'll second it.
Okay. So Jackie, we have a motion on the table. So all discussion is about this motion. So do you have anything that's related to this particular motion that you want to discuss?
What types of things are applicable to the motion specifically?
Good question. Well, I mean, I think the motion, Mike, if you could state it one more time for us.
My motion is to have the commission take a vote on whether to approve or decline moving forward with this Nutting Road artificial turf replacement.
I have a question about the specifics of that. Yep. The current proposal that we have, I know we've gone over this a couple times, but just real quick, like on what we currently have in our hands is what fill. I know the pad's involved, but we're using the what fill do we have in that?
That would be the SPR rubber, which is currently also installed there.
So would it be possible to move forward but have this is tough.
You could move forward and also in your proposal request an alternate infill.
Right. Yeah, could I modify the
one
motion?
Point I would just like to make is that once a turf field reaches the end of its life cycle, it is no longer safe to play on because the fibers break down. So it doesn't have the same cushion that it had when it was originally installed.
Like pair of sneakers.
Exactly. So it does get to a point where then it is unsafe to play on. Like I said, the typical lifespan is 8 to 10 years. Without the pad, you're exceeded that. So it is certainly time to make the decision to move forward or go another route, but you're there at this point.
Right. I'd like to modify the proposal just to include the provision that if we vote to move forward, that we have the different options before us before we make a decision as to which exact one we're going to go with.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's just a matter of quoting it. So yeah, that's no issue.
That question wouldn't be that would be a question for Chris.
Yeah, so I think in my opinion, I'm still not hearing a very crisp motion here. So Mike or Matt, let's see if we can clear up what we're asking. So that
could I make a motion to take a vote on whether or not to move forward with the artificial turf installation, with the caveat that we have in the future access to the three options that were presented tonight.
Okay. I think hang on one second, Jackie. I just want to verify with Kyle because he's going to be handling the RFP process. Kyle, is what Matt is saying or proposing, does that make sense to you, and is it possible?
It does. I think it might be better to say pick one side or the other, not motion to take a vote.
Right.
Motion to X, either approve, and I wouldn't say approve, I would say recommend the replacement of the turf field with X. And
Yeah,
the X can be,
I think that's,
with the crumb rubbers, the 1.5 million. It sounds like if we go the EPM, is that right, Russ? The EPM rubber, it's gonna be
Yeah.
200,000 more than that. And if we go with the sand fill, it's gonna be 300,000 more. So
And I'll get you firm,
you
know,
could make,
I'll send you a
could make a
proposal. that goes through.
motion, Matt, to recommend each of the three types to the capital planning committee.
Would it be easier, Kyle, to just say, why don't we make a recommendation that the capital planning committee considers this project at X amount, which would allow us to fund any of those options, and then we could put the RFP out and specify, we would like proposals for these different options. Because it
Yeah,
sounds
that
like,
would certainly be, it would be the most encompassing.
yeah.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
it sounds like we probably need more towards the $2 million level than the 1.5 we're currently budgeting.
Right.
Okay, so Matt, I guess in my mind, the motion would be, I would move to recommend that the capital planning or I guess we could say, I move to recommend moving forward with the artificial turf replacement and make a funding request of $2 million. Subject to, I don't think we need the subject to. I think, would
yeah.
that work?
I was the second. Mike, do you feel comfortable doing that, or can
I'm not trying to give, well, I don't know if you want to give it a hard and fast number or just put it as enough.
We do need a number, right? Because we
Okay,
need to go
number.
through the capital planning process,
Okay.
and we need a number at that stage. Now,
Then,
just to be clear, we may not actually spend that. So, we may decide, okay, the RFPs that we get back for X infill and Y this is equal to, this number, and it's less than 2 million. But if we say we are going forward with a $1.5 million project and that does get funded, it will be very hard for us then to modify and say we want to have something that's going to cost 1.8 or 1.9 million. Does that make sense?
I'm comfortable with that motion. But before we do anything, there are at least three questions I see in the question and answer. We want to deal with those before we even vote on the motion.
Yeah, well, the problem is I've got a motion on the
Okay.
table. So either you
Yeah.
table, you pull
Yeah.
back your motion and we can have further discussion, which is fine,
Okay.
because there are a number of hands up, a number of questions. So if you want to, I don't know, forget the technical term.
Okay, I guess, to be fair, I'd say I withdraw my motion temporarily pending answering the questions that are in question and answer.
Okay, so that's fine. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate that. So, and the one thing I did want to point out, so Matt, do you still have a question?
no, I'm comfortable with,
Okay, we're holding off for a second.
yeah.
Okay. So could you lower your hand, please, Matt, if you don't mind? Thank you. Okay. I do have John Amato, who I did promise time to speak tonight. He is a civil engineer, Westford resident, who is very familiar with all this stuff. Would the commission still be willing to hear John speak for a few minutes this evening? I know.
I
Yeah.
would.
Okay, John, you're on. Go for it, sir. Thank you, commissioners. And you're on mute, John, so just unmute yourself, please.
Can you hear me?
We can. You
Okay,
just want to give a brief background on your qualifications. I know I said it, I think I got it right, but just in case I was
You
wrong.
you were awesome. It's an A+, so thank you very much. Just if you don't mind me commenting, I believe, and I could be wrong, that you want to agree to a motion that allows you to find a designer, design the field, do the permitting, and build the project. So if you just say build the field, someone may say design isn't included in that. So you may want to, you guys do what you need to do on that, okay? Just a thought. Okay. My name's John Amato. I live on Chamberlain Road here in Westford. I'm a civil engineer, and let's see if I can get this in I gotta get to my screen here, because you guys are in it right now. Here we go. Okay, here we go. I've been working in the field of sports design, athletic design for 30 years. Planning, design, athletic specialty surface, consulting through, high school, through intercollegiate facilities. And I've done a professional facility many, many moons ago. Okay, I want to talk to you about several projects. One's divided a little bit more so that we can address it. The first one is what I would call engineered third generation infill field systems. Okay.
John, are you sharing something on your screen, or do you want to share?
Oh, I got to share that. I'm sorry. Thank you. Now how do I get to that? I got to find your screen. It's not coming up. All right, here we go. There we go. Sorry. And I'm going to put you up here. Sharing not turned on. Can you provide sharing? Oh,
Kyle, can you
I'm
grant?
going to go over to here, and God willing, I'm going to be able to turn that on. Let me move this out of the way. Share. All right. And I got to go back to my, let's see. Is it the full screen?
Yes, we can see it. It looks
You
good.
see, I apologize for that.
Yep.
All right, okay. We'll start again. No, we won't start again. We'll continue from where we are. I've got several topics I'd like to cover. We don't have to cover all of them because I know we spent a lot of time. The first item that I list is engineered third generation infill systems. Player ball surface performance, very important. A little bit of history about surface testing and some exposure related testing and concerns along the way, health and exposure related items, touching, getting things in your mouth, breathing, things like that. Consumer Product Safety Commission news, surface impact attenuation and environmental impact. Those are the items I'd like to cover.
That's a lot. So just try and be brief, John. Okay, because we
I
are.
will try and be brief, but
Okay, thank you.
I provided some stuff you asked me for, and we can look at it later, I'm sure.
Sure.
So third generation synthetic turf is turf that has infill in it, basically. And what we've done is to field that nutting road. And what you see on the left over here, you've got your stone base, you've got your turf bottom, your fiber, and your infill. All your resilient performance characteristics take place in that infill, which makes the infill spongy, soft, and not perform as the way you might. It might deflect or deform more. It might be unstable. When you engineer the system, put a pad on it, and you talked about a pad, what that does is it allows you to take 2/3 of your infill, depending on the pad you select, and put it in the bottom. And what means is that it's always uniform. And always being uniform means, oops, it behaves the same way. See if it can work without that. So the impact attenuation deformation from an impact, when you get thrown to the ground or head impact, that takes place in the pad. The performance characteristics, running, turning, jumping, where you don't have heavy impacts, that takes place in the rubber and the sand on the top. Together, it's more of an engineered performance system than a typical synthetic turf. Very different from what you have, but it would be a very good improvement from longevity and performance standpoint. Testings you might want to do where you look at performance to understand how a field performs is vertical rebound, shock absorption, vertical deformation, rotational resistance. That's when you turn your foot, when you make a cut in a field or a court, and surface irregularity. And these are just a portion of the test, but these 5 tests have an ability to tell you almost everything you need to know about playing on a field. So they become very, very important as you go down the line. Your specification for design should probably include that your field be tested for this. All right. Testing with synthetic turf fields has taken place over a long period of time. It started with rubber tracks in 1966. In 1976, they created the Berlin Athlete. That's what you have over here. And this tests for force reduction and deformation. Those are characteristics that have to do with person surface and not impacts due to a fall or being knocked down. Okay, these are some tests that ASTM has created to take care of that. I won't go through them all, but they look at Gmax, they look at HIC, they look at other shock absorbing characteristics like force reduction and deformation. We have more of those, rugby specific. This has to do with vertical deformation and energy restitution. Playground surfaces use this kind of test to make sure they're safe. And there's sampling things as well that go into the work that ASTM provides. You may be familiar with this face. This is Amy Griffin. Amy Griffin was a soccer coach at the University of Washington, women's associate head soccer coach, goalie coach. And she had goalies that were coming down with cancer. And she was to the point where she was worried about it. So she called NBC and she spoke to a friend who put it on the news. You already heard about SBR rubber. But one thing you didn't know was that it was created, Charles Goodyear created vulcanization, which results in SBR rubber in 1839. And vulcanizing cross-links molecules, it makes a whole bunch of different compounds, one big molecule that is very durable and hard to break apart. And that's why we use it. In response to claims that Amy made, she was concerned that SBR rubber might have been the cause of these cancers. That happened in 2014. In 2016, ASTM published 3188, standard specification for extractable heavy metals. Basically, we created a test that allows you to test SBR rubber in all infills to the same level you test toys under the Consumer Product Safety Commission standards. So the rubber gets tested. If it's being tested in a proper specification, it gets tested to that extent. There's been a lot of research going on. Back in following up on Amy's comment, they got to President Obama, and President Obama said, we got to study this. 2 years later, they started the study in April 2016, and they created some initial things. In 2024, in April, they published a rubber, let me go back here and change pages. They published an SBR rubber for playgrounds and sports fields. An evaluation, testing that they did. They did exposure testing. They did background, surface, different kinds of conditions. And these are the things that they learned. The EPA published this. In general, they find activities on playing fields support the conclusion that although chemicals are present in the tire from rubber, exposures can occur. They are likely limited. Generally, only small amounts of most organic chemicals are released from prior rubbers. So there's a whole series of things in the study that they basically came up with. Conditions on the field are no different than background samples taken. Heavy metals are less than they thought they would be. Biomonitoring pilot study. In the blood, things were less than or equal to the general population. PAHs, the same thing, the same study. Pre and post PAH during athletic facility activity showed no increase. So the information that we hear isn't full. The Netherlands Institute for Health has the same results. The European Chemical Agency has the same results, and find that you might as well play on the field because being healthy is a good thing. The National Toxicology Program, there was no evidence of toxicology in mice from ingesting force-fed mice from rubber. And analysis of the blood and urine showed no chemicals, or they were very low. All right, a little bit about fibers. So ASTM created a test for fibers to get the lead out. Back in 2007, 2008, they've had testing that showed it from 3,000 to 4,000 parts per million. The testing and the standards that we worked with at ASTM to bring us in compliance with the toy standard dropped the lead threshold to 100 parts per million. The synthetic turf fibers that we're seeing are all lower than 40 parts per million and typically less than that. That's a 100% decrease from the 4,000 that we had initially. We talked briefly about ASTM 3188, extractable heavy metals. That follows the toy test. We worked with Consumer Product Safety Commission to come up with that standard, that test method. There's another one that recently came out, ASTM 3496, 2020. It's a polyaromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs. And what they did is we created a test that allowed us to test for what they call the REACH 8. And the REACH 8, if any of these eight PAHs are present, then all of them are present. So we only test for the 8. This is being tested, all these are being tested in specifications where they pay attention to this. Just this year, method 1633, EPA came out with a test method for testing solids and tissue and things of that nature. They weren't able to do it properly, but before they were testing with their own test. Now we have a common test. Since this has come out, the testing that I've seen for PFAS for 40 different compounds tends to come out no detect. I've seen 2 test reports out of about 20 that had anything detected. So the method is doing a good thing. With these methods, with the effort from ASTM, the manufacturers are going to get the PFAS out of their fiber. They don't all have it out. Some claim they do. Some use the magic of words. They say it's PFAS free or has no PFAS. No, it doesn't exist in the chemistry world. Free does. What free means, it's lower than the standard that's allowable. So most of those are probably saying it's lower. They did use PFAS for manufacturing fiber because PFAS, some of the PFAS compounds, what they call process aids. And the process aids make things go faster. So that's the quick and dirty. I apologize for rushing through it too quick. But if you specify the field properly, if you do the proper testing, you can have a field that's awesome to play on, reduces injury, lasts a long time, and protects the environment. But if you don't do the homework and don't put the requirements in your specification, you have no control of what they're going to give you. So that's the big magic, the magic pill, is you need to have control of what's specified and how it's done. And you can address the concerns that have been brought up. And so far, I think they've all been addressed. Can I answer a question that was asked earlier about PFAS? Why do we have it?
Sure.
Are you interested in knowing? Westford was a spot up the area where they farmed and they had manufacturing. And the rivers and the brooks and streams were right in there. And all the stuff that came out of the buildings and all the stuff that washed off the farm all got into the rivers, brooks, wetlands. And over time, 100 years of farms, almost 100 years of factories, stuff gets in the water and it creates problems. So now we have to clean it up. But the stuff we're doing now is less of an impact than the stuff we're doing later. And we're going to make it better. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Appreciate your time this evening. Jackie, do you have a question? I know your hand's still up.
Oh, yes.
yeah.
Thank you, John. I do think it is important. I don't know if the current proposal on the table that Kyle has, but I think what John has mentioned and having the design thought through, and I think that is relevant to some of the things that I've raised too, in terms of the proximity. Where are you putting this in proximity to your water source, the zoning, which I do think is an important consideration, right? I mean, for anything that you put near your water source. Mark, if you agree to that question too, I'd be interested to know what Mark thinks. But I think that, and someone who has the expertise, I don't have any idea. So someone who has the expertise to tell us what is a safe distance, how do we know if it is, how do we test for that? I know John mentioned previously, he's tested water supplies in relation to turf fields that he's installed as part of his work. And so I think doing that due diligence is really important, not just replacing something that's there. Massachusetts is putting forth legislation to ban towns from being able to purchase synthetic turf. I guess I do have a question. No one has to answer this. Why would they put that legislation forward if there's not some risks involved? And the risks that I think we should consider aren't those to the athletes, because I think everyone's shown evidence. Athletes aren't really at risk from this, but if we're putting it close to water, and a lot of the tests that we're seeing about the toy standard and things like that are not related to your water is running through this field, right? They're just like, the field is safe for you to play on, but if you're drinking the water through it, that seems like a different story and a different test.
Okay, thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
Mike, do you have a question? I do want to let residents ask
do.
questions, so go ahead if you have a question.
Yeah, I do have a question. Earlier, you indicated the process that if we were to vote on this and approve it, what the process would be in terms of going to town meeting and everything else. What happens if we have a vote on this and it's voted down by the Parks and Rec Commission? Where does the whole thing stand at that point?
Yeah, so the commission had already previously decided to move this forward to capital planning, which it has already gone through. And I'm going to state this because I'm trying to answer some of the questions that came up in the Q&A section. So the reason why we're having this discussion this evening is because as we've continued conversations, there's been some members of the Park and Rec Commission, as well as members of the Capital Planning Commission, committee, who have raised questions about environmental impact, health, impacts related to the artificial turf fields. So as part of doing due diligence, this commission has revisited this conversation. That's why we are here tonight, to listen to community members, to listen to some of the experts in the field, if you will, hear some of the information from our town staff related to PFAS contamination, to revisit and potentially make a new recommendation. And it's certainly up to the commission if they would like to withdraw this capital planning request for this year. That is definitely on the table. I will point out, however, that you've heard many times this evening that the current turf fields are end of life, and they, if potentially tested to see if they are safe to play on, may not pass that test. And if that's the case, then the commission will be faced with a really difficult choice, which would be to continue to allow athletes to play on a surface that may be unsafe, or to close the fields down. And if those fields are closed down, we will severely impact very large athletic groups in this community and impact the ability for teams and youth to play and get out there and participate in youth sports, as well as some adult leagues. So it's definitely something that we need to keep in mind. I don't think it's something we can put on the back burner forever. Jackie, I saw your hand was up first, but Dan has yet to have a chance to ask a question. Do you mind if I take him first, Jackie? Okay,
No,
go ahead, Dan.
thanks.
I just had a question before this is proposed again. It might be for Kyle, but what do we do besides grooming as far as maintenance for the artificial fields? Is there like a disinfecting aspect? And if so, how frequently is that done? Dan, great question. I'm actually not certain of the answer of that. I don't know if disinfecting is part of the regular maintenance or not. Certainly grooming is a regular part of the maintenance, but I can get back to the commission on that.
Dan, does that address your question?
Yeah, I'd be curious to know that when he gets back to me, but.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not aware of us doing any mass scale disinfection of the fields. Jackie, you're up.
Yeah, Chris, just to your point, and I know I'm zoning in on this, but you mentioned the field would be tested for safety for the athletes in terms of, because it's at end of life, and that we would be up against a dire issue if they can't use the field. There's a lot of consideration put towards that. I think what deserves equal consideration is knowing if putting the field in the exact same spot causes any possible risk to our water source. I do not know if it does, right? But we should know. And I did want to mention, because I know Mark mentioned it is very costly to do testing. It's also very costly to not do testing and to put people at risk. But aside from that, I wanted to mention that the Toxic Use Research Institute, TURI, out of Lowell, has offered to meet with us, and that they're offering towns grant opportunities. And they suggested Westford apply for the grant opportunity of up to $30,000 or more, where they could help us with this project specifically in navigating this project. So I think that it's definitely something we should consider. They said they could meet with us as early as this week, but they could not meet with us before this meeting. So I think we could find more information out of that, and that would be a great opportunity for Westford. And some funding would be provided to us to assist in that effort. So I wanted to mention that, and anyone who wants to be involved in that conversation.
Great. Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you.
All right. So we have gotten a number of questions on the chat about community input. So I'm going to turn the meeting over now to the residents. Diane Wood, you have your hand up. So I'm going to ask Kyle to unmute you and feel free to address the commission.
I am. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody. This is all great information, but I guess my reaction is it may be a little premature. There seems to be still a lot of questions, not a lot of data that we're actually seeing in black and white, and everybody has their own opinion. I'd like to know what some of the other communities are doing and have done to fulfill their needs for their fields. That's one part. And the second part, since CPC funds will not be allowed, what is the thought process on the reality of how this would be funded? Are we going to go to the community and ask in this time of dire need for FY26 a $1.5 to $2 million increase? I'm just curious to know what the thought process is behind the reality.
Yeah, sure. Diane, thank you for the questions. First question regarding other communities. There is a number of articles out there, from neighboring communities such as Concord, for example, and others that have done a variety of different things regarding their turf fields, from putting on moratoriums to the building out of new fields. Other communities have put in fields. So I think the things that what other communities are doing, it just runs the gamut, unfortunately. So I don't think you're going to get a lot of guidance there, and I don't know how that really impacts Westford either. Second, from the perspective of the funding, I think you've heard a couple times this evening that the current fields have surpassed their expected lifespan. So the commission is being diligent in trying to maintain our athletic amenities, our recreation amenities for the town. Failure to do so would mean potentially having to close the fields down. And if we did that, we would not be able to support the number of athletes that are currently participating in sports like soccer and lacrosse on the existing non-turf, non-artificial turf fields in this community. So what that would mean is if we don't replace these fields with either artificial turf or rip up the turf and turn them into grass and put in sprinkler systems and all that, which is also going to cost a lot of money, we're talking about severely restricting athletic opportunities to hundreds and hundreds of kids and families. So I don't think, delaying or not doing this is an option. As for how we fund this as a community, that's really up to the town manager and the finance director to figure out how to do that, and then for the residents of Westford to support it or not. But this commission is trying to do due diligence and being good stewards of our recreation amenities and bringing this issue forward so that the town of Westford can take a vote on it. It may not happen this year. We may not be able to fund it this year because of your point. We may not have the money, but we want to put this in the pipeline because we know it will need replacement, and we've got to start the conversation. Does that help answer your questions, Diane?
Sort of, kind of, thank you. I think it's a no-win. It's a tough situation to be in right now. That's the reality. And every organization, every group in town has their own specific wish list,
Right.
as if it's Christmas. And not everything can be done all at once. So we're going to have to be creative in how things get done around here at any given time, you know?
Agreed. Any other residents you want to speak to the commission, please feel free to raise your hand. Diane, if you're done with your questions, if you could lower your hand, please, I would appreciate it, just so I don't call on you again. Thank you. Let's see, we do have some other questions here in chat, and then Jackie, I'll get you in a second. So, okay. So this one, Heather Fitzpatrick asks about this meeting's being for public input. Oh, Heather, you just raised your hand. Do you want to address the commission?
Thank you. I don't have my questions that I already gave you in front.
Actually, yeah, I'm sorry, Heather, timeout. I just made a big goof. I didn't get Diane on this, but if you could just give me your full name and your address just for our minutes, I would appreciate it.
Heather Fitzpatrick, 13 Shannon Circle.
Thank you, Heather. Go ahead.
I'm just curious. I was expecting more analysis of different costs at this meeting since it's already come before capitals, and you had just brought up grass as an option. Has there been any homework done to evaluate how much converting to grass would be, how much to maintain it would be versus putting in this system and the maintenance costs related to that?
Yes, thank you for the question, Heather. We have not done a detailed analysis just because of staff time and the timing of our request to capital. I did bring up to capital that the commission was having these discussions, and that if the commission decided to move in a different direction, would the capital planning committee be willing to support the request that we currently had in front of them for 1.5 million. We do feel that the amount of money it would take to change the field over to natural grass and put in a sprinkler system would probably fall somewhere close to that budget item. So, you know, if for some reason the commission decides to go that direction, the commission would then ask Kyle to seek a quote for doing that work, so that we can complete the capital planning process. As far as the maintenance, Kyle, do you want to speak about the annual maintenance of one versus the other?
I don't know that I can speak in any real detail. The maintenance is different. Certainly the day-to-day maintenance for a grass field is certainly a whole lot more effort for our crews than the turf field. We groom the turf field a couple times a year. We stripe, you know, maybe once a year, and that's pretty much it for the maintenance of that field. The grass fields we're mowing, you know, probably 2 times a week or more during the spring and fall seasons when grass growth is high. You know, fertilizing, seeding, aerating. There is a lot more effort involved in maintenance of the grass fields.
Thank you. Heather, any further questions?
Yeah, so I guess I would just want to see all the numbers. I mean, if it was cheaper to go grass and it's significantly cheaper, that would pay for a lot of maintenance. But then my last question is, what would be the timing of, if this were approved and voted, what would be the timing of redoing the fields? Which season?
Kyle, do you have any feeling for how we would work that into the work for?
Yeah,
for
I think we'd have to see what the timing of the approval was, the timing to put out an RFP, get responses back and look at it. And ultimately, we would work with both the vendor and the users of the field to find the best time, whether it's, you know, summer season in between spring and fall, or do we try and squeeze it in late fall after the soccer season, really we would look for advice from our user groups and rely on the expertise of our vendor for how long the replacement project would take. So I don't have an answer for you today, Heather, but that's the thought process we would utilize.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Heather. Jackie, I see you have your hand up. We still have a bunch of questions in the Q&A. Do you mind if I keep going through those, or do you have something you want to share right now?
Well, related to what Heather said, I've also had the question on the cost analysis. I know Turi has a fact sheet, and they did an analysis or referenced an analysis of a 16-year synthetic turf life cycle compared to natural grass, and synthetic turf was 2.5 times the cost of natural grass. And if you think about it, right, you could $10,000 a month you could pay, and it would take 15 years to even approach the cost of the replacement of the synthetic turf, which is a lot, right? I think 10,000 per month seems like a lot. Chris, you had mentioned you felt like the cost might be comparable. I don't know what you're basing that on. I would say there's probably a significant difference in that natural grass is probably much more affordable. And of course, it takes, like Kyle's said, would need more work, but you could hire those people because we'd have.
Sorry, Jackie, I was
funding.
speaking to the replacement of the fields with natural grass, not the ongoing maintenance of the natural
Right.
grass field versus synthetic.
It would
turf.
still. I still think that would be a lot less if you and I think that Turi study references that that full scope of what that replacement would cost. And then one thing I wanted to ask the commission too is if that Massachusetts bill passes, that towns in Massachusetts will no longer be permitted to purchase synthetic turf, then if we do go forward with this project, what happens? We're going to be forced to not purchase a new field after the life cycle of the new field is over, right? So we'll have to replace it anyways.
Yep, it's always a possibility if that legislation does move forward. There's legislation that's filed all the time that goes nowhere. So I don't know if we should be making a decision on the possibility of that happening.
No, I would not make a decision on that, but it's just something to consider.
Absolutely.
It's not making a decision based on that. It's, what do we do if the product we want doesn't exist anymore in the future?
Right. Good point. Okay, so thank you for that feedback. All right, let me just continue to go through some of these questions. Actually, we got a hand up here. Andrew, go ahead and you can address the committee. Please state your name and address, please, for our minutes.
Andrew Pokrovsky, 10 Newport Drive.
Thank you.
So I'm an age director in Westford Youth Soccer, and I would just like to speak to some of the speak to not as necessarily a representative of the organization, but as someone who uses the current nutting fields frequently in my coaching. So one of there are two advantages sports wise that having the nutting fields available to the soccer program bring. One of them is that it's very helpful for athletes to be able to practice on a variety of surfaces because many other towns have grass or turf, and there's no way to predict which surface a particular game will take place on, and therefore athletes that have familiarity with both types of surfaces will be at an advantage. Additionally, given the way that the grass fields operate, our soccer season in the spring, we start practices usually late March or so, and grass fields most of the time at least in my experience, don't open until around mid-April. Sometimes the 8th, sometimes the 15th. And it's I, I don't know the exact kind of algorithm used to decide whether a field is open, but it's just the field becomes open or not. And so as a result, what happens is that for a period of time during the spring, nutting is the only field available for our athletes to practice on for several weeks, if not at least a month. And to compensate for that, we, for the lack of grass fields, we frequently rent space at millworks and other such indoors facility. And so if the nutting fields become unavailable, that would result in a cost increase to the participants of these sports programs, because the sports programs would have to either, well, would have to rent the additional space, or they would have to start the season later. So I just wanted to bring those points up.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate your comments. I'm going to go back to the Q&A section here. I think a number of these questions we've addressed. Christy Bates asked if the WA turf was installed at the same time. Is that turf being replaced too? No, it is not at this time, Christy. It's in a little better shape than the Nutting Road fields. So that is not under consideration for the next fiscal year. I think Heather, we talked about the timing. Donna, can CPA funds be used to convert a turf field back to grass? That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. As you heard from Mike earlier, he is our representative from the Park and Rec Commission to the Community Preservation Commission. So he can talk about that with that commission and bring back that information to us at a later time. Thank you for the question, though. Michael, you asked a question about lights. Yeah, lights, I think, are a non-starter at that location. There was a lot of abutter concern about lighting at that location. I think that's why it was never really considered as part of the initial process, and it was obviously very expensive. So I don't see lights in the near future there, particularly because, as you heard, we're struggling just to get the money to replace the fields themselves. Let's see. Public input question from Heather. I think we addressed that. Mike, again, Michael says, why did the town wait for the turf to get this poor before acting? Well, we've had this on our list of priority projects for a while. We do have a lot of other athletic and recreation amenities that we need to maintain, and this one was moving up the list as we were addressing other recreational amenities that were in more dire straits. For example, the tennis courts and basketball courts at Jack Walsh, which we had to close because we didn't, they just fell apart. So, and then let's see here, Heather. Okay, that was public input again. All right, Michael, did the town purchase equipment to clear snow from turf? If so, at what cost? And has it ever been used? Kyle, do you have the answer on that one?
So we do have a snow blower attachment for our tractor that we have used to clear snow off of nutting fields. I'm not sure if we bought the tractor for nutting fields, but we do have the ability to do so. And in my 2 years here, we have done so.
Okay, thank you. All right. Any other questions from the community? Don't see any hands up. Why do we close? Oh, okay. We have another question from Matt Cotter. Why do we close nutting so early then for the winter? Kyle, I think that would be a question for you.
I don't know. As far as I know, there's no reason that it would need to be. If the group wanted to use it, they could contact Park and Rec Department and solicit a permit to use the fields.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, we have a hand up from Brian. Can we unmute him? And Brian, please state your name and address to address the commission. Oh, did we just lose Brian? Nope, okay, hands down, so. Yeah, so Matt is asking a question. The gates get locked and the goal frames get chained in late November, early December. It sounds like there's no reason why we couldn't open the gates and put the goal frames back in action as long as there's a permit asking for use of the field. So I think we could make that happen in the future, Matt. All
I
right,
think
Brian.
Michelle wants to jump in on that too.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Michelle, do you have a response to Matt?
I'm not really sure, why they get closed that early. It was, I believe, always a decision made by, before Kyle, the previous park and rec directors, working with the maintenance crew. It was a collaborative decision amongst them, not in particularly the recreation department. So.
Okay. Yep. So
I
Matt,
hope that's clear.
okay. And Matt asked, how about neighborhood kids? Matt, I do see, I was over on the fields last week, and I think it was Wednesday. And there was kids were coming up onto the field, even though the gates were locked, but I think it's inconvenient. So we will look to see if we can revisit that process and see if we can keep the gates open for longer. And make the fields more accessible in sort of the shoulder season. Thank you for your comments. Brian, you've got your hand back up, so feel free to address the commission if we can unmute Brian.
Yes, Brian Dempster, 9 Phillips Drive. As far as raising money for new turf fields, I know that a lot of other surrounding towns and a lot of other surrounding complexes rent out the space for clubs to pay, fees for using fields. Is that an option for the town of Westford to do that?
Yep, we do rent the fields out to not only Westford centric based groups, but groups that are, not Westford based can come in and rent the fields. So if you know of groups that would like to rent them, have them contact the recreation department and we can go through the permitting process, and love to have them. Any other questions, Brian?
No.
Great. Thank you for your comments, Stephen. Appreciate it. Mike, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question for Kyle, and he's probably not prepared to answer this, but something Jackie mentioned. I was curious, off the top of your head, what the annual cost of maintaining, say, the natural grass fields at VFW for Little League and softball, compared to the annual cost of Nutting Road. Is that something you would know off the top of your head, or is it?
No, it isn't, Mike. That's a long-term project that we're trying to get to those unit kind of costs. We don't have the data collected to provide a good answer to that question yet.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, watering the fields, fertilizing the fields, mowing the fields on a constant basis, all spring, summer, and fall, versus not having to do any of that to an artificial turf. Also lining the fields, putting the white lines down for the baseball and softball, things of that sort. Just curious.
Great. Hey, Russ, you have a question or a point you want to make?
Yeah, I would just like to state, when you have an artificial turf field, the maintenance is very low. So it takes probably about 45 minutes to an hour to groom the field, and that's just once a month. So it would take one guy 45 minutes approximately to groom that field. Obviously, maybe pick up some debris or something like that, which you would have to do. And the lines can be tufted right in the field, so you'd never have to paint the lines again. You could basically just determine what you want in there, which is also in that proposal, and eliminates that as well. So in comparison, cutting the grass 2 times a week, watering it, fertilizing it, and everything else, it is. And one major point is the amount of use that you get out of an artificial turf field, because you could use it almost all year round, given the climate that you're in. Plus with rentals that you could generate money back, there is significant use or value to having an artificial turf field. So the amount of use, you could use it 10 times more than natural grass. Everyone knows once heavy rain, you got to stay off the grass. There are pretty much no condition you have to stay off the artificial turf. So when you're comparing the actual value of them, it's certainly much more valuable to have an artificial turf field, and the cost analysis usually like to leave that factor out. So you use a grass field, let's say once or twice in a day, and it's pretty beat up. You could use the artificial turf 10 times a day and rent it out and everything else to generate money. So that's certainly a very valid point to consider.
Great. Thank you, Russ. Appreciate it. Okay, so we're at about an hour and 40 minutes on this topic. I think we've had some great discussion. I'm not seeing any raised hands from residents. So I will ask the commission what their pleasure is at this time. Is there any direction that the commission can provide? That would be helpful. So commissioners?
Chris,
hang on a second. Mike, I think Jackie got her hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
jumped in.
apologize.
So,
Oh, no,
Jackie,
that's
go
okay.
ahead.
Mike first is.
No, go ahead, Jackie, because I'm going to make a motion, so you may want to talk.
Oh, you were? I was just going to say, it sounded like there's still some open questions on the table in terms of cost analysis. Also, it was just mentioned how frequently are the fields used. To know what that value is, we'd have to do kind of a usage analysis. But I think the cost analysis would be really helpful. And it sounds like other members of the town think that, but also having more understanding too, if we need to address any of the bylaws and considerations in terms of the wetlands or water source. And I think that would involve the Conservation Commission. I think there was also another question. If the synthetic turf field was replaced with natural grass, if that was something that the Conservation Commission would fund. So I think that was another
the question was CPA, community preservation.
Oh, CPA. Okay. If that was something that would be funded from a separate budget, I guess. So those were a few of the questions that I gathered. There might be additional questions, but given that, it feels like we should get the answers to those questions before making a final decision.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Kyle, go ahead.
Chris, real quick, just to address the previous comment and a piece of Jackie's comment. Trying to put a cost value to it is a challenge. What I can tell you for certain is that we are already challenged staff-wise to maintain the grass fields that we have. You as chair know the calls we get every spring for service, trying to get the fields ready, the athletic fields, the town common, the park areas, everything else we maintain with our group of people. Should we convert to grass, certainly we wouldn't be able to keep up, and either service levels would suffer further, or we'd have to look at hiring additional staff, which we did lose an employee last year in the budget cuts, so I don't see that coming back anytime soon. So I would just point that out as a cost as well. It's more of an opportunity cost that we simply don't have the bandwidth to add more grass fields to our current workload.
Kyle, are we required to use town employees for field maintenance, or is it something that could be contracted out to an outside contractor?
Either way, it's still a cost we don't have budget for.
But well, if we have money to fund the turf upwards of $2 million, we would have 10,000 per or more every month for like 15 plus years to get to that amount. So we would have a significant budget if that was allotted.
Yeah, I guess I can't speak intelligently to that
But
scenario.
that's why we should actually have a cost analysis, right? We're making a lot of speculation, but it would be, we should be able to get a cost analysis. That shouldn't even be a question.
Well, I think that's part of what we're deciding here tonight. So one decision, right, is do we continue to move forward with the replacement of the artificial turf surface? Or do we move to a different direction, which would be natural grass, in which case then we would need to get all the data related to the cost of installation, the cost of disposing the existing field, the ongoing maintenance of that. Is it even something that we can support as Kyle has suggested? If we can't, is there a budget for contractual labor to keep it up? So there is a lot of data there that would have to be uncovered. The reason why we haven't gotten those numbers is because we haven't made the decision to go in that direction. And I'm not going to take Kyle and say, Kyle, go spend, hours and hours of time researching this when he doesn't have that time unless the commission feels like it's a direction that they want to go in. It's not an inconsequential ask is what I'm kind of boiling it down to.
Let's just have a contractor quote it for us. How much would it be to replace the grass and then maintain it every month for the next 10 years, 5 years? We can just ask a contractor to do it. Kyle doesn't have to do any work. Why can, and
I don't think it's that simple,
but why wouldn't we get that answer before we make the all right. So I personally don't care how much it costs, but I'm just saying, why don't we do that?
Jackie, I've certainly heard you. I think you've made a very valid point. And if the commissioners feel that that's the direction they want to go in, that's great. Russ, go ahead.
I would just say, because I already figured out this cost, just to remove the field and recycle it and that process, that's over $150,000 alone. Then you have curbing, you have probably 8 to 12 inches of stone, you have drainage, that would all have to be removed. And then you'd have to build back up with topsoil because, you have that whole layer. I think you'd be very surprised how expensive that it would be. And if you want to have a contractor price that, feel free, of course. But I actually would say to convert back to a natural grass would be relatively close to the same price. So the 10,000 that you think that you could potentially save, you wouldn't save. You'd actually be spending that much more. And then on top of that, you'd have the increased cost of maintenance because you have to stripe, cut the grass, fertilize, all of the other things. The maintenance long-term, I haven't actually even seen this in so many years because it's not something that comes up often. It used to come up all the time, and I wish I remembered the numbers, but the cost analysis from artificial turf to natural grass, the amount of use, I used to have a breakdown. I'll have to see if I could send it to you, Chris, but it's not comparable. The amount of use just negates that cost. But the only point that I want to make is it would be a significant cost to convert this to natural grass. If that was an option that you guys were interested in, it's not like it's going to be like it might be 1.2. Of course, you're looking at potential other infills, which could get you to 1.8 or close to 2. But the actual cost, what you guys were quoted, was I think 1.2 range. I guarantee you'd be pretty darn close to that to convert it back to natural grass. And then from then, you would have continuous, more expensive maintenance. So you wouldn't have that $10,000 in your budget each month. You would still have that initial upfront cost. Either one would go to replacement and then significantly drop off with the annual maintenance, or one would go to going back to artificial or natural grass, and then your cost would then go up maintaining it. So you could look into that, but I would say you'd be very surprised with how expensive it would cost to go back to natural grass. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Appreciate it. Mike, your hand, I think, was up next.
Yeah, well, I'm about to talk about a motion, but before I make the motion, I have 4 reasons for making the motion. One is, I've always been a believer that perfect is the enemy of good, and is this a good option? I think it is. Is it perfect? Maybe not, but I think it's a good option, probably certainly better than what we have now. It's also less, as Kyle mentioned, it's much less of an impact to the DPW staff to maintain this compared to what it would take for them to mow, water, mow, fertilize, all that with the natural grass fields, which he says he's having a hard time maintaining the ones we already have. That's the second reason. Third reason is this, it is what the stakeholders, I believe, want from the point of view of youth soccer, youth lacrosse, for their purposes. So they have a, sort of a dog in the fight, if you will. And everybody has the option to voice their opinion at town meeting, whether, if this gets to that point for the funding, there's certainly be a lot of discussion, I'm sure, at town meeting. And everybody would have a chance to make their opinion known there. So for those 4 reasons, I make the motion that we approve the replacement of Nutting Field with a new turf field, and using that caveat that I think Matt mentioned and Cal mentioned for asking for $2 million for that project.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have a second to that motion?
I'll second that, and also my hand was up too, but you said exactly what I was gonna say. So
Okay.
and probably in a nicer way. So thank
Okay.
you. So
Thank you.
I second the motion to take this to a vote.
Okay, so the motion is to approve moving forward with an artificial turf replacement and to increase the capital request to $2 million to cover possible options of different infills, different pads, so on. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Mike, your hand's up still. Do you have a? No.
What constitutes as discussion on a motion?
So if you have any questions or comments, or you're not clear about the motion, that would be discussion on the motion itself. So we can ask if you need more clarity on that, you could, I think, speak for the motion or against it if you didn't want to.
Could the 2 million also go towards someone to evaluate, like John Amato, to determine, I'm not saying John, but someone of that job type, right? To evaluate, is the zoning the way it should be? Are we following, what we should be doing now, right? It's different now than it was when the first turf was installed. Things have changed. Like there's different environmental concerns. So could some of that 2 million be used to get the appropriate engineering guidance on the installation of the field and any relevant testing that's required?
Okay, I think I get what so you're looking. You
Chris,
would
can I-
want to modify the motion so that there is some mention of testing and design incorporated in the project scope.
Yes.
Kyle, what's your thoughts on that? Can you render an opinion, sir?
Yeah, I think whether that's in the motion or not, that's part of any project, is doing the permitting and research. And so, that's part of what we do in Public Works every day. So all of that stuff will happen anyway.
And the environmental testing as well, if we wanted to include that, if we wanted to conduct that.
Well, I wouldn't say that, Jackie, because as Mark said, to do a hydrologic study, you're talking tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I'll concur with Mark, having been involved with those kind of studies for PFAS. Largely, particularly when you're talking numbers as small as what we have in our wells. We could spend all that money, and I think largely it's going to be inconclusive. If you ask me my recommendation, I wouldn't recommend that because I don't think it would be value to the taxpayer funds to do so. When those kind of studies are useful is when you're trying to identify who or what is the cause or the source of the illicit discharge, in this case, the PFAS. Given that the PFAS numbers in the wells around Nutting are the same or lower than the rest of the town, and we now have a lot of data points around town from the work that the health department did with private owner wells. I just think, you know, if we're not looking in the hundreds of thousands parts per trillion of PFAS, then really any study that we commissioned wouldn't give us any reasonable results to determine a root cause other than natural deposition, as John mentioned earlier.
Okay. I definitely appreciate that answer. And one thing that I just find disappointing is that we have experts that are willing to meet with us and give us information, and maybe it will be the same as what you just detailed, Kyle, but we have not been able to meet with them yet. So
I think as part of the
yeah.
process, Jackie, I'd love to meet with you and the Turi folks to see what they offer. And I'm never one to turn away grant money, but there's usually strings. So I just caution you there, but I'd be happy to take a meeting with you and them.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to build on what Kyle said, we will be treating for PFAS within a couple of years. So I wanted everyone to keep that in mind as well. So we will be stripping this material out of the water.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Just a couple statements, I guess, or yeah, statements from community members. I just want to read real quick. They may come in before the motion. If we get a cost for grass, then this is from Matt Cotter. If we get a cost for grass, then we need to also study the negative side effects of pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers in that area. We also need to consider the air pollution. The EPA estimates that a gas-powered lawnmower produces emissions equivalent to over 11 cars per hour, and that's a lawnmower and not a tractor. Also, what is the impact to our wells over there to water the grass? And then Tom Grove states, many townspeople and town youth programs, lax and soccer, want to keep the turf field. The existing turf field serves us well, and we don't want to delay it any longer on a wild goose chase. Nutting Road location would not be a good location for natural grass field. It's close to wetlands, shady, etc., and there would be more runoff from natural grass due to all the watering that would need to be done, etc. And Stephanie Granger, but those treatment facilities do not cover all town residents since 25 plus or minus % have private wells and no access to town water. I think that was in relation to your comment there, Mark. Okay. So those are answered. All right. Jackie, your hand is still up. I think you're good, but
The one last thing I was going to say is that we are also waiting to hear back from the town manager on Westford bylaw, chapter 171 wetlands, and any other relevant Westford bylaws that we need to address with this project, because that bylaw protects wetlands and related water sources. And one of the Westford town residents mentioned that we have the same concern with natural grass. So we just need to know either way, synthetic turf, natural grass, should we be putting this close to our water source? Would it, is it negatively impacting us? Because that's also a big cost to the taxpayer if we have to remediate our water and just the health of everybody in Westford. And that's why I'm bringing up this concern.
Yeah, okay, I thought Mark said that's in the process of being done over the next couple of years. The water treatment will handle that concern. So that's in the process of already being taken care of, I believe.
Right, but we shouldn't knowingly install something into an area close to our water source that's going to contaminate it. No one would knowingly do that. regardless if they thought they were just going to be taking out those contaminants. That cycle doesn't make sense.
Right. Okay. Good point, Jackie. Thank you, Mike. Dan?
If this gets approved, will Kyle be required to go before conservation?
No.
Okay, was that done when this initially was constructed?
Yes. All the
Okay.
necessary permits were, this was done. Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
But the act of, you know, replacing it and kind of mucking stuff up doesn't require anything in relation to the neighboring wetlands?
We would certainly do that check, Dan, but I don't believe so. Think of it as a maintenance item, no different than replacing a roof on a school.
It doesn't seem like that now, Kyle. 10 years ago, we didn't know about the contamination of our water source with PFAS. We really just didn't know about that. Now we know so much more. This seems like a major installation that we're putting close to wetlands, and it does seem like it should be considered a new project. There's filtration being put in this, there's rubber in the ground, things that are going through the ground. It feels like there's a lot of potential impact, and that even if something was addressed 10 plus years ago with conservation, our knowledge has changed. This is a new project. I think it would be really a crucial area that would need to be addressed and not bypassed.
Can I just speak to that real quick? There's
Yes,
some
please go ahead, Matt.
There's pretty strict parameters on what the Conservation Commission can weigh in on. It's all based on the Wetlands Protection Act. And if it's outside of the riparian zone of a wetland or a river, it's out of their jurisdiction. They just don't have any, they don't have any say on those projects.
Thank you, Matt. Dan, your question?
So this is outside of a zone? Is that what Matt's saying?
I don't know. I'm not sure what the wetland delineation is, but
I know, I don't mean to open up that whole can of worms either, but it looks pretty close.
If it's within the whatever the town's bylaws require for Conservation Commission's review, then it's going to go under Conservation Commission's review. So, but I don't know if it's within that zone or not.
Yeah, so I guess my suggestion here is that question becomes relevant if we decide to move forward with using artificial turf, right? So there's a motion on the table that we move forward with replacing the existing artificial turf surface with a new artificial turf surface, looking at a budget of $2 million and looking at various options for the inlay of the infield material, the shock pad. My feeling is if this moves forward, in other words, this vote passes, that certainly we can make an inquiry of whomever we need to talk to. I don't know if that's I don't know who on town staff would be able to answer this question, whether that's our conservation resource planner, or if we need to go to legal counsel, but we could do that due diligence. And if it comes back that this needs to go in front of the Conservation Commission, then it would be brought to the Conservation Commission. Yes, Jackie.
Why do we have to vote before knowing that? Why can't we know that first? Because I feel
Jackie,
like
So Jackie, I'm going to answer your question. If we vote to not move forward with replacing this surface with artificial turf, right? Then is the question relevant then? Would you still say that if we were going to move to natural grass, would you still be saying that we need to go to the Conservation Commission to have their input?
possibly, I mean, other residents made the points about the pesticides and so forth, but I mean, are we allowed to say how we would vote? Are we allowed to say that out loud before, or no, we can't? I would want the field if I knew we were putting it somewhere that wasn't impacting our water.
Jackie, I would say that we have to vote because there's a motion in front of the panel, the commission to vote on.
I think you're.
But I'm not understanding. I guess I still have the question, why can't we know the answer before we have to vote? Because I don't feel like I'm making an informed vote if I don't know the answer to that question.
And you could vote no or abstain. That's always.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and absolutely, when you cast your vote, you can, you've
But-
been very, I think, open with your feelings on this subject. This is how a commission works, right? So, if the majority of the commission feels that the comments you've raised need to be followed up on, that's the way they'll vote. Otherwise, they'll vote a different way. So I think, I know it's hard when you want to get this information, and if the commissioners, some of the other commissioners feel otherwise, then that's just the way the commission goes. I still think it sounds like, just reading some of the comments that have come in, that we probably will need to go to the Conservation Commission with this project. So if that happens, then that information will come back to this commission and we'll have to take action on it. I think that's the best we can do at this point. I don't think, I don't know if it makes sense to go to Conservation Commission without a firm proposal in mind, right? Because they may need to evaluate a natural grass installation differently because, as you heard earlier, we're going to be talking about a massive replacement of materials at that site than potentially just changing the infill and the actual turf surface. So, I don't know if that makes a difference to them. It might. But I don't think we just go in and say, oh, we don't know what we're going to do. We're going to do one or the other. Can you give us your opinion? They're going to need more information, specifics.
Okay, so if we vote yes, if an individual votes yes, this would go to the Conservation Commission. If an individual votes no or abstains, then the question's unanswered.
So if this motion doesn't pass, in my opinion, we have either the option to do essentially nothing, right? Which would mean eventually we're going to test the field. We're going to find out that potentially it's unsafe. And then the question will come before us, do you keep it open or not? And it may be outside of our hands. Maybe legal counsel will say, you need to close it. There's too much of a liability risk. And then we've got a problem. The other option is this is voted no. And somebody has another motion that says we should do X, and X, I'm not going to say what X should be. So I think we have to take this motion. It's been seconded. We have to vote on it. And then we have to, go where the rest of the process takes us. I think, talking to conservation, certainly fine. And again, as I talked through earlier in this call, lots of other opportunities for public comment and input along the way before this ever becomes a finished product. And I think, to Kyle's point and your point, I think we certainly have the time to, talk with Turi, see what they provide to us in terms of information and resources. And this isn't something that if we say yes tonight, it's going forward tomorrow. This is a long process, but we've got to, be clear on our direction. And, I think we paused in the process to get public input, to get a lot of information that you shared and others have shared. And just to reaffirm that we're making the correct decision, whatever that is. So with that in mind, I think we've had enough discussion. Certainly, if you cast your vote, if you want to speak to why you're casting it, feel free to do that as well. But if there's no other discussion on this motion, I'm going to call for the vote.
Well,
Is everybody?
Chris, there's a
Yes, sir.
comment in the question and answer about the Conservation Commission, I think.
I think I addressed that,
Okay.
Mike, that
Okay.
it sounds like some residents have suggested that we do need to go to the Conservation Commission. So I think town staff will take up that request. As Jackie pointed out earlier, we did forward a question to the town manager regarding the Wetlands Act. So we'll get some input on that and we'll take the necessary steps based off of that input. Right, so, okay, is everybody clear on the motion? Because we've had a lot of talking. So Devin, are you, I can't see Devin, hang on. Devin, you good? You're clear on the motion, sir?
I'm clear. I'm here.
Okay, good. Dan, you're all clear? Yep. Matt, I think you're good. Jackie, you're good. Mike, you're good. Okay. So because we're virtual, I'm gonna do a roll call vote. Jackie,
I'm not in favor at this time.
okay. Matt,
In favor.
Dan,
Aye.
Mike,
In favor, aye.
Devin,
Aye.
and I'm also an aye. The motion passes. It is not unanimous. So thank you everyone this evening for all the input. Especially want to thank our guests who came this evening, Russ, Ken, John. Thank you for spending your time with us this evening and lending your expertise. For all the residents that joined us this evening for this topic, thank you very much for your thoughtful comments and input. We really appreciate it. As you heard earlier, this is just one step along the way. Please make sure that you stay informed by subscribing to the agendas of, say, the Capital Planning Committee. As this moves forward, Board of Selectmen, Select Board, excuse me, as we set the warrant for annual town meeting, you can stay involved with that process as well. Okay. All right, so we're going to move on to our next agenda item. I'm going to ask commissioners, it is late. We had an item to discuss the implementation of beach fees for residents. We did not take any action on this from our last meeting. Is there a commissioner who would like to make a motion that we do anything in regards to this discussion this evening? Or have any other further discussion?
I'd like to make a motion that we postpone that till January. As long as that still gives Michelle enough time to implement anything we decide on.
Michelle, if we postpone this discussion until January, does that give you enough time if we were to implement some sort of beach fee for residents?
Yes, it will be time enough to implement something.
All right, so do we have a second to that motion?
No, I'm sorry. Oh.
Anybody want to be a second to that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Dan. Any discussion on the motion?
I'm definitely ready to vote on it, but I think it's if the group would rather continue it. If there's a lot of discussion, I don't think anyone wants to get into that tonight. But I mean, I think I've had a month to mull it over, and I think we had a really good discussion last month. But I'm definitely I'm tired too. So if that's all.
Okay, fair enough. So it sounds like we have we have a motion, we have a second. No further discussion on the motion. I'll call for a vote. Matt?
I'm gonna abstain.
Abstain. All right. Dan?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Devin?
Aye.
Jackie?
I'm gonna abstain from this one.
I'm going to say aye. I'm too tired to really think about this, so we can move this to another time period. Thank you. Let's move on to our next agenda item, which is not an easy one either. That's an update on the field and court permit fee analysis. Certainly, does anybody want to take up this discussion this evening? This is probably even more complex than the beach fees. I don't know if I really need a motion to postpone it, but if
I'll
somebody
make a
wants to.
motion, again, in the interest of time, as we did with just the previous one, to postpone it. I think given the late hour, is that we get into a long discussion of that, we could be here for another hour or two.
Yeah, exactly. I would ask commissioners, so I guess, sorry, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Devin. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Jackie?
Aye.
Aye. Matt?
Aye.
Dan?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Devin?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. All right, we have parks, grounds, reports, and updates from our DPW director. Kyle, you want to give us a quick update?
I will be brief. few updates, Jack Walsh Court reconstruction project. We're now in a winter shutdown as of November 22nd. We expect work to start back up sometime in April, depending on weather. And the playground is back open until construction resumes. At our last meeting, we talked about court colors and adding a third color for the basketball court and the pickleball court. I did present that to the contractor and they came back with a change order request for $5,471. So I'm in discussions with them trying to find project cost savings that would allow us to do the third color of paint. Any questions on that item? Okay.
None for me.
The Shades Hill project for Forge and Edwards Beach, I still have not received an installation schedule. So at this point, the crew is going to barrel off the product that was delivered months ago so that it doesn't get damaged. And I expect it'll likely be installed in the spring. Going back to nutting, we have hired a consultant to perform the GMAX testing on the nutting fields, and that's going to be performed tomorrow. They will give us a full report on the condition of the field, which I'll send along to commission once we get that report. That'll be good information to have so that we have, at least solid information on player safety data. And that's all I have for tonight's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate it. All right. Our next agenda item is recreation program reports and updates from our rec director, Michelle.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
I'll be brief as well. Things are going well here at Recreation. We have our after-school program running successfully in session 2. We are getting through the holidays. December ends up being a short month, so we're trying to do some planned activities during December break. So we're working on that. As far as budget is concerned, we are 56% through our total expenses, and we have collected around 46% of our revenue. So we're trending well in the expense area. I know, Chris, you had mentioned something last meeting about where we are compared to last year with after school. Although some programs are down from numbers, there are other programs that are up. So it's been a nice balance. And compared last year to this year, we've brought in, we're about $45,000 ahead of where we were in last November. So that's all I have for recreation updates.
Awesome. Thank you, Michelle. Do you think, is it worth talking about the recreation subsidy and what's planned for the next budget cycle? Do we want to share that information tonight, or?
I wasn't prepared to share that.
Okay.
So I do know that I'm getting in, I will be entering FY26 with no subsidy. The recreation enterprise will be covering its own funds for FY26 for the first time in maybe ever or in a long time. So
I thought that was good news to share with the
thank
commission.
you. I'm proud to say that. So it's a teamwork makes the dream work, I guess.
All right.
Michelle, congratulations on a good job done to get to that point.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. We're on to our approval of our meeting minutes from our November 2024 meeting. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at the meeting minutes?
I have one change.
Yep,
Yes.
one change. Go for it.
Item E, like the third line down, refers to it says the later primarily due to the irrigation system. I think it should be the latter, Latter, but it's a minor correction. I think the word latter, Latter, should replace later.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike. Dan,
Were these minutes in an email from Michelle? Because I didn't seem to find them.
ooh.
They went to my town of Westford email.
Yeah, I got it in the town of Westford email.
Yeah,
I
I'm
don't-
gonna start doing that. I was instructed to try to use the town email, so when I send out the agenda and the minutes, I'm going to use your town email. Dan, I think you have two.
Yeah.
'Cause
I
your
don't think I
school-
saw it in, well, it wouldn't go to the school one, but I don't think I
Right.
saw it
Hmm.
in my personal or the town one, but I can double check.
Okay. Do you want us to hold off on approving them this month, Dan, till next month, so you get a chance to review them?
It's fine, probably. I don't think there's gonna be anything that's gonna shock the world.
Okay. All right, fair enough.
I don't see Dan on it. There, on the
I'm
email.
sorry, Dan. That's my fault. My apologies.
You had agreed to cater the next meeting.
Yes.
Yes, we should have the
Right.
next meeting be in person, and Michelle will cater it. I second that motion.
Deal.
All right, so is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make that motion to approve the minutes with Mike's edit.
Makes sense. Thank you, Matt. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mike. Any discussion on the motion? All right, seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Dan?
Aye.
Assuming- All right, Jackie?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
Devin?
Aye.
And I'm also an aye. The motion passes unanimously. All right, under our next agenda item, which is old/new business, we do have a prospective Park and Rec Commissioner in the audience this evening, Alicia. She's been listening for the last 2 hours and 22 minutes. Alicia, I don't know if do you want to just say a quick hi to the commission? I wish this was an in-person thing, but if you just want to say a quick hi and just maybe tell the folks a little bit about yourself and why you want to be on the commission, that would be helpful.
Sure, absolutely. You guys are doing great. I know it's a long time to be talking about these issues, but you guys have been doing a good job. My name's Alicia Rozlowski. I've been living in Westford for the last 28 years, and I've recently kind of gotten interested in town politics and interested in kind of what impacts who, especially when it comes to sports, because that's kind of my main thing. I'm a high school phys ed teacher. I've been teaching for over 10 years. So this is kind of right up my alley, no pun intended. But anyway, that's kind of my interest level here. I would like to be involved just because I like all sports. I also like kind of knowing what goes into all of the decisions that are made regarding all the facilities. So actually this meeting was quite interesting to listen to. I took a bunch of notes, just kind of like soaking it all in like a sponge, but this was pretty great. So thank you guys for the work that you do, and hopefully I can take this last seat and contribute to discussions and votes and whatnot. And I know you can't see me, but I promise I look presentable.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for your interest. I appreciate it. So sort of next steps here would be, we have a form that we have to send to the town manager, who is the appointing authority. So as the chair, I'll fill that out and get that over to her. And then our town manager typically sets up a time to speak with prospective commissioners, just a quick interview. And then if she'll sign off at that point, and then you should be hopefully good to go. The town clerk would, send a letter to you, and then you would need to come into the town clerk's office to take the oath of office, and then you could potentially join us at our next meeting, which I'm going to use as a segue to let's think about scheduling our next meeting, which would be in 2025. So it looks like the 6th of January would be what we're looking at. How does that work for people? Yes, from a Dan. All right. Jackie, how's that look for you?
Works for me.
All right, Mike, yep.
Yep, it's fine for
Yes,
me
go ahead,
too.
Jackie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. Thanks,
Works for
Matt.
me.
All right, looks like we're all good. Kyle, you're a yes?
6:30 or 7.
Well, what would you prefer, sir?
That's up to you guys.
Uh,
If you ask me my preference, I could say 5. So
That would be my preference too, but I will not, no way I'll be able to make a 5 o'clock meeting. Let's go back. I mean, I'm hoping that we can do this in person, and if that's a desire of the committee, right? I mean, we still have the ability to meet virtually, but do people want to try an in-person for our next one? I'm seeing some shaking heads. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So why don't we go for, we'll try and go back to the 6:30. I just pushed it to 7 just because I think it's easier for people with families to kind of get through the dinner hour and get to a meeting virtually. But we'll go for January 6th, in person, 3rd floor Park and Rec offices at Roden Bush at 6:30 p.m. All right. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Do we have a second?
I second it.
Thank you, Jackie. Any discussion on the motion? Nope. All right. Guys and ladies, thank you so much for all your time this evening. It was a super long one, and I know, we still have questions and some people still have concerns, and hopefully we'll continue to try to address those going forward. And again, appreciate all the hard work you guys are putting in on this commission. So with that, I'll call for the vote. Mike?
Chris, I just
Yeah.
like to thank the public, the non-commission members that attended this meeting. It was a good turnout, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Appreciate their involvement always. Love having them. So sorry. So, Mike,
I to adjourn.
aye. Jackie,
Aye.
Matt,
Aye.
Dan,
I
Evan,
Aye.
and I'm also an aye. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you attending the meeting this evening. We'll have this recording available for future review. Probably will go on to WestfordCAT at some point, so you'll be able to watch it there as well. Any questions about the meeting, just feel free to email me. My email is on the Park and Rec Commission's website, on the town's website. So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.